you are currently serving in active duty or have been honorably discharged, you may perform the hand salute. Thank you.
Want to grab them?
Yeah, where are they? Behind the curtain.
Behind the curtain, it's like Wizard of Oz.
There they are. You guys
We're gathered today as family, as friends, as neighbors, as work partners, to show our honor, to give our respects, to gather together as a family and as friends and as peoples to discuss and to share the memory and the very special life of adventure of our dear Larry Landskroner. It's not an easy eulogy to share. We speak of a person who's larger than life, for whom words don't describe so easily. His life was a very fast-paced adventure with a lot of amazing twists and turns and very interesting things along the way. He wasn't always the easiest person to understand or to get along with, and he did have a very hard time showing the people who he truly loved how much he actually loved them. But still, even if we couldn't always understand him, we couldn't always know where he was coming from, he made life very interesting and exciting and not boring whatsoever. He was blessed with a good wife, kids, and a family who tried their best to be patient with him, and they tried their best to let him go his own way and for him to find his own happiness. And so at very minimum, if we didn't understand who he was and all the things he did, the fact that he had such great kids is a very special accomplishment. How he pulled it off, how he did it, I don't know. But later on we will share and certainly talk about the fact that it was a very amazing thing that his kids turned out with a lot of strength and courage and intelligence. It may be presumptuous to say, but the Jewish belief is very strongly that in the next world, the world of heaven, it's a world of truth, where the things of the world, the mysteries of the world, explain themselves to us. Things we never understood become much clearer. So it is in this world that I know that he can understand how much his kids tried, and how good you guys were, and how the world, which he always sometimes felt that was against him, was really with him and really wanted the best for him. And that I hope he should enjoy in this world a happiness and a peace and joy in seeing how much his kids, his grandkids, his friends and families, how much they did actually get from him, how much they succeeded in spite of him, and how they went on their own way, a very special, courageous, intelligent way that he would be proud of. I wanted to share with you a selection from the Psalms. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo iksar, Bina yisteshech yarbitzeni, al mei menuchos yenachaleni. Nafshi yishovev yancheni v'magli tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begetzom aves, lo irara ki ata imadi. Shiftecha umishantecha, hema yenachamoni. Tairach lefanai shulchan neged sayrai, dishante v'shemen roshi kosi ravaya, achtov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavte v'beis adinoi, le'orech yamim. We'll recite the translation of this psalm, Psalm 23, together, if you wish. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in right paths for his name's sake. Though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou hast set before me a table in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I had a chance to speak to a few people in preparing these words. His daughter Kathy was able to share with me, many a story. Some things that were easy to come up with, some things that were not so easy, with Jack and with some of his other friends in the audience today. He grew up in New York City, and he had a hard time growing up as a Jewish kid in the neighborhood. He was often teased a lot for who he was. He had two parents, and it was himself and his brother Sheldon. And it wasn't easy for Sheldon from the very beginning, because as a youngster, he suffered a difficult infection, a very high fever, and this had a great effect on his development and his mental progress. And Larry took responsibility for this. He felt very bad for what his brother had to go through and how it would affect the family. and he took on the responsibility that he would make sure that Sheldon would be okay. And somehow, with help, Sheldon got through all the things that he needed to get through. He was able even to find a marriage partner in life, in his dear Goldie. And Larry took a lot of responsibility for the family, in particular financial. He took odd jobs, he sent them money, he delivered newspapers whenever he could. And joining the Navy perhaps was one of the reasons behind that, was that it would help the family in some way. And he chaperoned his brother. He was with his brother until the very end of his life, until he passed away at age 80. It was hard for him, the fact that he lost his father at a young age. His father was only 58 years old when he passed away, and this greatly affected Larry. It was very hard for him. It was troubling for him, the circumstances in which he lost his father. I don't know the exact details, but he was very sick. He was sent to the hospital. He was sent home, and he somehow passed away unexpectedly. And this left a big sore on Larry's consciousness. And this made him think that I've got to do something to make the system different. And this is one of the reasons why he was always so passionate in his career in being a medical malpractice lawyer, one of his specialties. He so much wanted to make right for the people who were wounded by the medical system. Just like many things in his life, how he got his education was a curious one, an interesting one. I don't know all the details. We tried to put some of the facts together. But he started out in Miami of Ohio, in a liberal arts college nearby. And he had to move on fairly quickly to a new school. He went to Union College in Schenectady, New York. But the details are not clear, but somehow, he was able to figure out a way to get to law school. He didn't complete his undergraduate education. He didn't get his degree as an undergraduate, but he was able to get to Vanderbilt University. He was able to qualify for the GI Bill, even though technically, he wasn't the same as most of the candidates in the GI Bill, but he was able to come out of Nashville, Tennessee, with a very prestigious law degree that he would later use in his practice. He set up shop in Cleveland and was destined to become a very successful lawyer. He met Florence, who was his wife for over 50 years, and sadly, his marriage ended just a few years ago. They had 4 lovely kids together, 3 girls and 1 boy. And Lee, regretfully, was taken away from this world a few years ago in a very sad circumstance. And this is something that is not easy for anyone. He was not an easy father to live with, to get along with. And he had very large and very distinct expectations for his girls and his boys. He, of course, wanted his boy to succeed. He was the boy of the family. And he felt somehow that girls, would have to fare on their own, that they had to be tough and figure it out their own way. And the outcome of this tough stance was that his girls did have to figure it out the hard way, but they did it. They did it themselves on their own merits. And like we said earlier, in the world that he's in right now, I'm sure that he's very proud. He very much understands and very much gets that he raised his girls to be tough and to strong and to be smart and to fend for themselves just like he did. He was a tremendous lawyer, very successful, and he specialized in many different types of cases: wrongful death, catastrophic injury, defective products, medical malpractice, personal injury, hazardous substances, consumer law, motorcycle damages, tobacco litigation, and many other matters. He was very qualified in a variety of areas of law. He was a lawyer for the United Auto Workers before Carl Stokes. He was an attorney for the Fraternal Order of Police. And he was a member of the very prestigious inner circle of lawyers, people who had taken on cases that were worth more than $1 million, a truly elite group to be part of. He was also the regional counsel for many important organizations, like I mentioned, the UAW and the FOP, as well as the NFL. And though I don't have the details exactly right, but he had some role in the cross-examination of Nixon at some point in the Watergate, when he was running for president. So he sat at a very exclusive desk and was able to drill him with some very difficult questions. And not only was he an effective lawyer, but he was very politically active as well. He was involved in particular with President Carter, and he helped him in his campaign. And his own Winnebago came to big use when President Carter came to town and needed a place to visit, to travel, and to go around town with. And after a successful career, there were many, many different lawyers that he had worked with and cooperated with. And sort of as a joke, as a tease, as a gift, on his 70th birthday, his kids arranged a letterhead, and they put 80 different major lawyers that he had worked with in his time in Cleveland. And of course, not all of these people got along with him. These aren't people that he always agreed with, or they agreed with him at the end. But it was kind of a nice statement to him that this was your life, and that these people that you agree with or you don't agree with, they're still part of your illustrious, legal history. But one of the things that he was most proud at was his work for the poor and the underrepresented. Kathy was sharing with me how one day as a kid she remembers that she walked into his office and the waiting room was full. It was full of people. More than 120 people were there. And who were these people? It turns out in the Huff neighborhood there was a big fire. And through some kind of mistake of the city, the fire hydrants were not working, and there was no way to put out the fire. And so Larry was representing this large group of people in a class action lawsuit against the city of Cleveland. There were many times that he would do good for people and help people who couldn't do it on their own. And I know this leads into a little bit of the work of his son, that his son is doing with the Public Justice Foundation. At one point, I know Jack went to work for his father, and you've got to be pretty brave to sign up to work for your father, and certainly if your father is Larry Landskroner. And Jack was able to look at it, with a very positive spin. It wasn't easy, and he and his father had got into many big disputes, into some legal matters, but it launched you in your career, and you were able to be a very successful lawyer in spite of or due to the efforts of your father and his law practice. He was a very bright man. He had a tremendous mind on his shoulders. He was president of the Philosophical Society. And I'm not familiar with this society, but I can sort of picture very bright people with a lot of different career interests and experiences getting together in a big room and solving the world's problems intellectually. And so he was a proud president of this society. So mentioning his life would not be complete if you didn't mention the word sailboat. That was his true love. And you can almost picture him with the stresses of his work and the hard work environment that he had, just hitting the water, going to a sailboat, and sailing into a land of peace and tranquility. And I know here we have Regis, his sailing buddy, and I'm kind of new to sailing, but it's pretty cool. You have someone who helps you make the boat go, but you have someone to talk to for hours. And so Regis very briefly shared with me how amazing it was being on the boat with Larry, that he was kind of like a father figure, and that you had the time and you had the ability to share with him a lot of things that were on your mind. And that it was kind of good for him because it was a time for him to sort of unload a little bit his stories, to share his stories of what he'd been through. And I hope you don't mind me saying this, Regis, but that Larry would often say that it's a good thing these people are dead right now because I wouldn't be able to talk about it. But just so happened, because they were dead, he was able to tell some very interesting, juicy details about the cases and the twists and turns of his life as a lawyer. And so I know he helped you out, Regis, and you helped him out a lot as well. It was kind of interesting that the boat that he had, which I understand was a boat he had for 50 years, which went through cycles of being in operation, being out of operation. It seems, I don't know much about sailing, but it seems to have a boat in use for so long takes a lot of work and dedication and focus. And his boat was called the Res Ipsa Locutor. And I didn't study Latin nor law, so I was just curious what this meant. And I thought it would be some sort of generic, cutesy boat term, as people often use on their boats. But I was not surprised to find out that it was a common term in law. And it means the thing speaks for itself. And at first I thought it was sort of an existential, philosophical thing about himself, like you get what you pay for, the thing speaks for itself, I am who I am. But I learned that it was a much deeper concept in law, that perhaps that there's an accident, and if the nature of the accident shows that the party was responsible, it doesn't really matter how the defendant acted. That's what the official terminology is. So it's probably a juicy detail for lawyers, It doesn't matter how the defendant acted. Sometimes the situation speaks for itself, and if you're a lawyer, you're all set. The case is yours. So I don't know if that's the exact context that he used it, but I am not surprised that his beloved boat, had this legal term. He also had a second boat. He had a very large, more than 100-foot sailboat charter business in the Virgin Islands. And I understand this boat was very large and had really beautiful accommodations. And that I did hear the family say that they have memories of going on this boat. It was a good time in life, where everyone was happy and everyone enjoyed themselves. And a lot of memories came from that. And I understand that there was a famous tornado which had happened to this boat, or the boat in Cleveland, the Cleveland boat. And, it was seemingly a scary story, but I think Kathy was telling me that somehow people were on that boat remember it with smiles and laughter. It was scary, but it was a story of heroism and quite big twists and turns, and not surprising that Larry got out of that one. And I saw on his website he got an award, the Maydes Award, is that correct, for this? Some award for saving lives at sea. Maybe that was from his Navy service. I don't know exactly. Okay, so he had rescued people on his boat. Okay. So, in terms of just putting it all together, his whole life was about adventure. He's always seeking out new things and new places. He was always challenging himself and seeking new thrills. And he gave us a sense that he wasn't always so interested in what we wanted, but he would guarantee us a good trip if we just stuck along with him. And the analogy or the image, that his kids provided was that, he was moving pretty fast. And if you could just grab onto his coattails and stay stuck with them, you'd have a pretty exciting, interesting adventure. So as such, his life was very eccentric, and nothing held him back. He lived his dreams, his fantasies, and he never gave up. When many people would stop traveling, when many people would stop practicing law, and just take a break, take a rest, sit back a little bit, and watch the sunset, that was something that he would not do. He went all over the world, to Tahiti, to New Zealand. He enjoyed his gambling, he enjoyed his cars, he enjoyed his lifestyle. And so it's a bittersweet life to conclude. Because on one hand, it didn't seem that he really understood so well the people in his life. He didn't really get his kids and didn't get his friends as much as we liked him to. But it's hard to say that a father, would not love his children, would not want the best for his children. And I know he did. But just sometimes life just gets in the way. The idea of Jewish life is that we come to this world very pure and very clean and very good. And we get sullied by the details of life. It grabs onto us and attaches to our pureness and makes things real complicated. And somehow in the next world in heaven, that pureness is always ours. We can always come back to it. And I know that core of who he was is really happy, like I said, for his children, and very proud of them, and truly prays and truly wishes and truly hopes for their best and their happiness and their success. His beloved ex-wife, who was very good to him and gave him a good family, I'm sure he prays and thinks that she should be in the best place. I know many of his friends, many of the people in his life that he worked with, also he wanted to wish them his best. And I know Candace is here with Charlie and her family, and I know those were people who were very important to him as well in his life. And lastly, I just give thanks to Kathy, that she was there for him in a really difficult time, and that the patience and the open-mindedness and the forgiveness that you had towards your dad. And I know that one day that we spoke in Montefiore, just you were so focused on your dad and what was best for him. And it didn't really matter who he was, what he had done, things from before. You were just focused on your duties as a child and as a daughter to make sure he was safe and comfortable. So we all pray for him, and we pray that his memory is for a blessing, and wish him peace, and we wish him happiness, and that he should just be proud and happy for that which he created in this world. The souls of the underprivileged that he helped, the children, the grandchildren, and the friends that he guided along their way, and that his future should be like the seas. It should be a little rocky, a little exciting, but also beautifully tranquil and pretty and scenic. So I call upon two people who knew him really well and are able to say a few words that are very special from the heart. So I call upon his grandchildren, Lauren and Matt, for a few words.
Thank you guys all for coming. I didn't really know if I was going to get up here and speak or not, but our grandfather was a very passionate person for the good or the bad, whether you wanted to hear it or you didn't. The guy had Big Kahuna license plate. He was the Big Kahuna. I have memories from when I was a kid of sailing with him on the boat, and I was not an easy kid to handle by any means. I remember him screaming at me to get down from climbing the sails, and I felt trapped on that boat. And then I didn't like it. I've grown to love the water over the years, and when I look at the water, I think of my grandpa and the distance between us. I know we had our differences, and it's nothing I can do about that now. But the way that I remember my grandpa, or going to remember my grandpa, is barefoot with the wind at his back and his eyes on the horizon. And thank you guys for coming, and he's going to be missed for sure.
So I should have written this with the dragon dictation that my grandpa loved to yell at as he wrote his many papers. And anyway, for those of you who don't know, my name is Lauren Gibson, and I want to say a few words in memory of my grandfather. Lawrence Landskroner lived a remarkable life, one that has inspired me greatly. His adventurous attitude, his broad range of interests, and his happy demeanor made him a wonderful person to know. He was patient and generous with his time and affection towards those he loved. He pursued many endeavors diligently and always rose to meet a challenge. I always felt that he expected the same of me too. He was very disappointed when I told him that I wasn't interested in going into law at all. And when I told him I wanted to be a nurse, he was disappointed that it wasn't a doctor. There was always something that I could have done a little bit better. And he was very philosophical in his approach to life. He had a great perspective when it came to the little things, never displaying any anger or showing impatience with his family and friends. Instead, showed a great dignity and humor. He extended this philosophy no matter what obstacle he faced. I have always admired this trait, as it doesn't seem to have been handed down. The strength of his character showed even in criticism. With a few wry words, my grandfather could be far more damning than most people could ever achieve with any strong language. I'll miss the stories of his strange adventures, and I'll miss the stories from his sailing extravaganzas. I'll miss his perspective and his gentle humor. I'll miss the surprising depth and scope of his knowledge. I'll miss the warmth he extended to everyone he met. I will miss my grandfather dearly, but I will treasure his memory forever.
So following the services here today in the chapel, there will be an interment at the Mount Olive Cemetery in Solon. And friends are asked if they wish to contribute to the Public Justice Foundation. At this point, we're going to please rise for the memorial prayer, and then we will remain standing, and at that point, family will gather for the recitation of the Kaddish here in the chapel. El Malei Rachamim, Sheichein Bamromim, Hamsei Menucha Nechain Al Kanfei Hashchina, B'malois Kedoshim Utahirim Kezayrakia Mazhirim, Es Nishmas Label Ben Yaakov Shehalach Loilamo, Bavor Shanachnu Mispalin Bar Haskaras Nishmaso, Began Eden Tehe Menuchaso, Leichein Bal Harachamim, Yasti Reichu B'seisa Kanafav Le'oilamim, B'yitzor B'tzor Chayim Is Nishmaso, Adonai Hu Nachalaso, Al B'yanuch Mal Mishkavo, B'shalom V'nemar, Amen. O God, full of mercy, who dwells on high, grant proper rest on the wings of the divine presence, in the lofty levels of the holy and the pure ones who shine like the glow of the firmament, for the soul of our beloved Lawrence Landskroner, who has gone into his world and whose memory we pray. May his resting place be in the Garden of Eden, and may the Master of Mercy shelter him in the shelter of his wings for all eternity. May he bind his soul in the bonds of life. God is his heritage, and may he repose in peace on his resting place. And we say together, Amen. People remain standing, please, while the family gathers together for the recitation of the